With that, we bring in Mark Lytle, attorney for IRS whistleblower Gary Shapley. He has not reacted, nor has Mr. Shapley, to these new developments in this story. Mark Lytle, thank you very much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Martha. It's good to be here with you. Thanks.
You know, I guess top line, what's your reaction? What's your client's reaction now that this transcript of his testimony before Congress is out there for everyone to see, and also the slap on the wrist that Hunter Biden got based on everything that your client watched throughout this case for several years?
Well, Martha, I can tell you that it's important to my client, Agent Shapley, to come forward. He wanted to just bring this out to the public as a whistleblower in a protective fashion, so that everybody could judge it. It could see the light of day. And as you can see, there's a lot of information that's been released that really gives a lot of support to what Agent Shapley is saying. In the beginning, when Agent Shapley wanted to come forward, we said that it's not just about Agent Shapley's words, but that there were documents that supported what he had to say and that support his credibility. And we think those documents have been released.
So let me ask you this. This is David Weiss. This is a quote from David Weiss in October of 2022. And this is around the time that your client says that he hit his red line with this whole thing. And he was told after years, it started in 2018 when they connected Hunter Biden, one of his phone numbers, to an amateur porn website. That's what began this whole thing. So after your client worked on this account for several years on this case, suddenly in 2022, they sit down and the United States Attorney Weiss, who was present for the meeting, surprised us by telling us on the charges, quote, "I am not the deciding official on whether charges are filed." And shortly after that, your client decided that he needed to go public with all of this. So there's a discrepancy here. You just heard Merrick Garland. He said he was always in control, David Weiss. You hear David Weiss say to your client, "I'm not, actually."
Yeah, well, I would love to point people to some of the records that have been just released yesterday. Exhibit 10 to Gary Shapley's transcript is, it's actually around page 178 of the transcript. It's a copy of the email that Gary Shapley, where he took contemporaneous notes of that meeting with U.S. Attorney Weiss. And it wasn't just Gary Shapley that was at that. That was a senior leadership meeting at the U.S. Attorney's Office that was attended by the special agent in charge from the IRS. It was attended by Gary Shapley himself. It was attended by the special agent in charge from the FBI and the assistant special agent in charge from the FBI. And Gary Shapley wrote up to his superiors, which included that same special agent in charge that was at the meeting, and he described it. And he said, Weiss stated that he is not the deciding person on whether charges are filed. And he described the whole events that Weiss laid out at that meeting, which was his red letter meeting, where Weiss said he tried to go to the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, and they wouldn't approve it, and he was trying to go charge it elsewhere in California, and he was trying to seek special counsel authority, and that got denied. And so this was a shocker to the agents who were present. And of note at this email that's in Exhibit 10 is the fact that Special Agent Shapley sent this up the chain to his command, including to Darrell Walden, who attended it, the special agent in charge, and asked Darrell Walden, "Did I get this right?" And Darrell Walden says, "Yes, you did." And so this, if he had gotten it wrong, Darrell Walden would have said, "No, I never heard that before." So there is credibility, there's corroboration of what Special Agent Shapley is saying.
Okay. There's a clear discrepancy here. And as you point out, there is evidence to back up what your client says about David Weiss saying, look, the buck doesn't stop with me, folks. It's going somewhere else. And we all know what happened when that happened. It got minimized after almost 5 years of investigation to a couple of tax charges and a gun charge that a lot of people have characterized as a slap on the wrist to move this thing along, although they say it's not completely closed. I want to ask you about this. This is when the FBI knew that the laptop that they were given, because they start with this porn situation, they have a link to Hunter Biden's, one of his phone numbers or text messages, then that links them, once they get this laptop, this infamous laptop, on November 6th of 2019, the FBI case agent, Josh Wilson, called up the computer shop owner, John Paul, and basically got the device numbers from him. Then we bounced those device numbers off third-party records, and it showed that it was, in fact, Hunter Biden's device. So that is in the fall of 2019. So how is it that a year later, right around the presidential election in November of 2020, 51 intelligence officials are claiming that it's probably Russian disinformation, probably not belonging to Hunter at all? Were all those people not aware what the FBI already knew a year earlier?
None of those people knew about any allegations of misinformation. In fact, the IRS didn't have, the agents assigned to the case actually weren't allowed access to the laptop. So they're concerned about that, about not being able to follow up on leads. And I think it leads to a question about the WhatsApp message that's been getting everybody's attention.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
So it's really important to note in the testimony right around page 190, this is Exhibit 11 to Gary Shapley's testimony before the House Ways and Means staff. It's important to note that this WhatsApp message did not come from the laptop or any nefarious source. Gary Shapley testified that they did a search warrant. They got a hold of Hunter Biden's iCloud account, and they did a search warrant to Apple, to the Apple Cloud, where they accessed Hunter Biden's WhatsApp messages, iMessages, and other information. And so this is credible. This comes from a credible source, and it's information that's very relevant to the dealings with the Chinese energy company and the income that Hunter Biden received. Now, I will say this. You'll see in the testimony that the agents wanted to follow up on this, and the prosecutors told them not to because, oh, well, maybe Hunter Biden was puffing or something like that. So the agent said, well, let's get the GPS location of the two, of the father and the son, and let's see if they're actually in the same room at that time. And the prosecutor said, we're not doing that. So closed another door on the investigation to make what is relevant to this case. And this happened over and over and over again. And that's what Gary Shapley wanted to come forward and make sure everyone could see, and this could see the light of day.
Yeah, I think this is fascinating because, I mean, what did they tell him when he said, well, why can't we pursue this location information on this WhatsApp text, which directly goes to the issue of whether or not the president was involved in his son's business dealings in China?
Throughout the investigation, there was a reluctance to engage any investigative steps that involved President Biden. And this includes in the testimony the efforts where they had probable cause to do a search warrant at President Biden's guest house where Hunter Biden had stayed. They had information that there was information that was relevant to the investigation located there. When the agents proposed it, the AUSA, Leslie Wolf, said, we're not doing that. There's no way we'd get that approved. Yet another sign that is contrary to the allegations that Weiss had all the authority to do whatever he wanted to do in the case, because she is an AUSA. Leslie Wolf was an AUSA for, under employment by U.S. Attorney Weiss.
So I want to give you some new information that we just got that Jackie Heinrich's reporting from the White House. And this is a statement from Hunter Biden's lawyer, who now is responding to essentially to this text that shows this kind of, shakedown-ish language, I would say, to this Chinese official who's connected to the Chinese Communist government and to this electric company energy company that Hunter was involved with his deal. So he basically says there's an extensive 5-year-long investigation that was conducted by the DOJ and concluded this week, even though we know that they say it's ongoing, which resulted in my client taking responsibility for 2 misdemeanors to pay tax payments as well as a firearms charge. He goes on to say the DOJ investigation covered a period which was a time of turmoil and addiction for my client. Any verifiable words or actions of my client in the midst of a horrible addiction are solely his own and have no connection to anyone in his family. What's your response to that, Mark Lytle?
Well, just so you know, Martha, and the viewers, my background is I am a former career federal prosecutor. I worked in the tax division and prosecuted criminal tax cases. And one thing that the viewers should understand is the information and the charges that Hunter Biden is set to plead guilty to, the 2 misdemeanors, those are tax offenses, and all tax offenses require a willfulness. and a heightened willfulness, if you will. And so the standard is that the Department of Justice has to prove that there's an intentional violation of a known legal duty. And that is no difference whether it's a misdemeanor or whether it's a felony. So what is it? Does he not have a drug problem when it's a misdemeanor, but he has a drug problem when it's a felony? The only difference between this misdemeanor, the failure to pay, and tax evasion is the existence of one false statement. Then it's a felony. And there's clearly a lot of hiding from the tax returns that's reflected in the evidence that's come out yesterday. The other thing I would add is, if I could, is
Please.
Compliments to Chris Clark, the defense attorney, for getting a great deal for his client. Every defense attorney would love to get that deal. I've never seen it in my 25 years as a prosecutor to get that kind of deal. But one thing I would point out is, why is Chris Clark, the defense attorney, carrying the water for the Department of Justice? I think the Department of Justice should do some explaining here as to why this evidence, this mountain of evidence, resulted in 2 misdemeanor charges and a recommendation of no jail time.
Yeah, well, I guarantee you that my next guest agrees with you 100%. He thinks there needs to be an investigation into what went on at the Department of Justice and how, as you say, and I've spoken to other attorneys who say the same thing, who've represented clients in similar situations, who say, my client never would have gotten this. I would have been the best attorney in the world if I'd been able to pull this off. So what happened is the question here. Mark, I hope you'll continue to join us. Obviously, this is a very big story. We would be very happy to talk to Mr. Shapley as well, if he wants to have his own thoughts on this known as well. Thank you very much. Good to see you today.
Thanks, Martha. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
You take care.